Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to put your hand up, so we're going to do the old fashioned with stand back, so if you could just stand up, face the wall, straight off of it. So short ride, so that's
Yeah, we were reading this one.
Nikita Kasab was arraigned about 2 weeks later.
He was in a suicide vest and he didn't have a shirt on. And I saw Nikita come out and he was a skinny, he looked like a teenager that you'd see anywhere. He looked scared and he looked unsure, and that was...
I know, how awful, huh? It is, and it's so sad too. Case after case we see like that. We were just watching another one there. Teenager killed both his parents. Yeah, she was talking about how calm he was. Horrific. And time again, these cases, they never want to acknowledge the workers and programs, people medicating them, telling the parents what to say and do. Yeah, it's sick. It's sick. We've been trying to get people to address it, and they want to keep ignoring it for some reason. Anybody? Yeah, wow. Well, it seems like a lot of people are. We just listened to another one this morning. We had listened to it a few times. I think it was posted 2 years ago. Yeah, so for people to put that into perspective, and you have a doctor, he's a psychiatrist who's going against and challenging the whole profession when it comes to those kind of drugs, and he's someone who took them personally and was still tapering off Lexapro. And he was saying how the symptoms of those medications are horrible, the withdrawal symptoms, how horrible it was. And even he, as a grown adult and professional, was like pretty much on his knees crying at his parents. Now, think if there wasn't awareness around him or people that didn't care about him and they had been fed up with his drug use, right? He's a professional doctor who was taking what he wanted for how many years? And he was talking about how difficult it was to come off of them. So imagine if, that was a lower class family and he wasn't a doctor. And they make a call. He's doing it again. Acting like a baby. Right, so luckily, he had good parents around him and a good support system. A lot of people don't have that, and they have state workers fucking with them, parents that are fed up. They need to get a job. Yeah, they need to be medicated. And for people to ignore that is completely ridiculous. It's insane. You people are psychotic and you need help. Flat out. Point blank. Period. Continue. And so on. Let it be. So be it. Alexa, play classical reading music.
The station, Classical Focus, free on Amazon.
Yeah, it is really sad. And to hear people, that's not uncommon, and we see this all the time, and it gets ignored, they lose their licenses, get casted off as crazy or having a mental illness. Go heal. We have a Camp David for you. Or Dawn. All right, we're on page 8, and Give Me Souls. In 1876, the Marquis de Mary de Val was transferred from London to Belgium, where he was to fill the post of minister plenipotentiary from Spain. Raphael, then 12 years old, was too young, his parents felt, to be left behind in England. And so he was enrolled at the Jesuit College, Notre Dame de la Paix, at 59 Rue de Bruxelles in Namur, presided over by Father Golfals, S.J., whose devotion to Saint Stanislaus, S-T-A-N-I-S-L-A-U-S, whose devotion to Saint Stanislaus, it sounds like Santa Claus, doesn't it? Stanislaus. It does sound like Santa Claus. Saint Stanislaus, was a bond between himself and this new student, equally enthusiastic about the saint. When did the term Santa Claus come? Good question. So when did the name Santa Claus become a popular name for Christmas? It originated from the Dutch nickname for Saint Nicholas, Sinterklaas. It first appeared in the U.S. press in December 1773 in a New York newspaper and was popularized in the early 19th century by writers like Washington Irving and Clement Clark Moore. You can explore the Santa Claus Real Origins article on History.com to dive deeper into how the 4th century bishop from Turkey transformed into the global holiday icon. Interesting. Student equally enthusiastic about that saint. At this institution, founded in 1833, classes were entirely in French, but Raphael, having previously prepared himself in accordance with the entrance requirements, was soon able to follow the lectures easily and to converse with readiness. What's that? So Santa Claus is from Turkey? Well, you can dive deeper into those origins, it says, if you want to, but for the basic Google search, the name Santa Claus originated from the Dutch nickname for Saint Nicholas, Sinterklaas. It first appeared in the U.S. press in December 1773 in a New York newspaper and was popularized in the early 19th century by writers like Washington Irving and Clement Clark Moore. So if you go on to the Santa Claus Real Origins on History.com, it goes into the 4th century bishop who is from Turkey, and it says he transformed into the global holiday icon. Right, so it'll probably tell you that who was this 4th century bishop icon from Turkey who transformed into the global holiday icon known as Santa Claus. Well, why do we have Christmas ham and not turkey? Turkey's on Thanksgiving. Some have turkey on Thanksgiving. On Christmas too. Some don't have ham. Some don't have a Christmas ham. Don't they have a Christmas turkey or chicken? Some were doing a turkey duck chicken. Remember those things? They were stuffing the duck and the chicken and that into the turkey. Yeah, it was a turducken. That's right. See? I'm not crazy. It was a turducken. That's right. Thank you. A turducken. Oh, that's funny. The new environment, in many ways, stimulating and pleasant. However, despite frequent visits to Brussels, where the Mary de Val family was stationed, the distance between Madame Mary de Val and her dear second son was too great for her maternal solicitude, which desired to have him near enough for her to keep personal watch over his now somewhat precarious health. Since the foreign students at Namar were very much in the minority, they felt somewhat isolated from the native Belgians, many of whom could leave each evening to enjoy the affection of a home circle, and so Raphael was not regretful when in October of 1878 his father decided to transfer him to another Jesuit school in Brussels itself. Alfonso and Pedro had preceded him by 1 year to this college, known today as St. John Berchmans. These two, however, were boarders during their entire stay. It was determined by a family council that Raphael, because of his impaired health, should stay at home at least part of the time, and thus he was listed at the school as a demi-pensionnaire. Raphael was more than proud of his brother Alfonso, who was graduated from the rhetoric program in 1880 with the rank of rhetoric program of 1880 with the rank of 5th in his class, and who bore away the Prix de Sagesse, an award bestowed by the vote of the students themselves with the approval of the professors. Raphael's own transcript of credits from Notre Dame was evidence of his hard work while there, but at St. Michael's his frail health became a definite obstacle. Although at first he was put in the 4th Latin class, his strength was such that he could not keep up, and had to repeat his course with Pedro, who was a year younger. Inwardly, Raphael was glad rather than distressed at this failure. It was so easy to say that he was willing to suffer for our Lord, but only actual tests of his loyalty could prove this willingness, and so he was happy to offer up what to some might have been a crushing humiliation. Over and over this rather and hard beginning, Raphael made rapid progress. Each week the Jesuits gave out a card to each boy with his marks, pink, yellow, green, or white, and his achievements merited. Raphael's was always pink, representing the highest grades. Despite his rugged disposition, inherited no doubt from his wiry Andalusian father, he always received as well the prizes for good conduct. Alfonso, even by dint of working as hard as ever he could, never managed to come off with more than the yellow card, but he did not mind. Such satisfaction did he take in the excellence of his younger brother, to whom he was so close. Their separation after only 2 years together at St. Michael's was a sad event indeed for both of the brothers. A spirit of fun pervaded these school years, which found vent in tennis, riding, shooting, dancing, swimming, or the water jug battles which made havoc of the bedrooms when all 3 boys were home over a weekend. One time their Uncle Joe, devoted to Raphael, took a prominent part in such a fight, to the amazement of a classmate named de Ursel, who had come home with the Mary DeVals, and to the immense delight of his nephews. Their visitor could not get over the respectable, middle-aged uncle involved in this midnight fray. Dramatic exploits were a colorful phrase of these college years. Raphael's aptitude for the stage was soon discovered, and he appeared in such roles as Flavius Clemens in the tragedy Jean de la Valette, or as the devil in Les Memories du Diable, a variation on his surname which greatly amused his St. Michael's friends, one of whom, Herman Ricker, insisted he posed for a sketch in his costume of Mephistopheles. I'm going to spell it. Mephistopheles. Mephistopheles. All right, thank you. Mephistopheles. Declamations were another of his special talents. Declamations were another of his special talents, much enjoyed by his campus audiences. In the refectory, Father Stordeo became in fatherly affection over his boys, while Father Corcoran tried to counteract this leniency with his own stern eye. Raphael and his nearest companion, Edward, made use of the time for lessons in Spanish. Patiently and with many a joke, he would teach his friend the Spanish names for table, chair, bread, water,
brown sauce, preserved apples, the apron worn by the Jesuit brother who served them, and even the terrible spectacles for Father Cockler Corin, whose apparent severity scarcely disguised his real benevolence. Cocklecorin is spelled Koekelkoren. Cocklecorin. Yeah, whatever. When the year came to an end, Raphael presented his pupil with a leaf torn out of his exercise book and inscribed thus: I, Raphael Mary Deval, Master of Idioms, confer on Monsieur E.S., who has passed on examination in which he has given proof of an extraordinary memory, a diploma of distinction. Carefully, Edward put it away as a keepsake of his angelic Mary. Never cross, never jealous, always in ideal companionship. In 1880, Raphael was chosen president of the St. Vincent de Paul Society, an organization of mercy, which was always to remain dear to him, and he prepared for the annual meeting a report which hailed with praise for its precision and completeness. In addition, he was chosen secretary for the Congregation of the Immaculate Conception. Never one to be ostentatious about his religion, Raphael, even so, was accepted by teachers and fellow students alike as a person of deep personal piety and given responsibilities in accordance with this reputation. The buildings of St. Michael's were wonderfully adapted to the pranks of its students. Winding stairways, long corridors, dusky rooms. Alexa, Volume 1. The college was truly a labyrinth of hiding places. The poor Jesuits had an especially difficult time in maintaining orderly ranks among the boys as they marched back from the church. For at the foot of the Escalier d'Honneur, there was a magnificent sculptured beast that awaited the caressing pats of each boy's hands as he filed past. Only the sudden appearance of Father Barrett, thin, wiry, with flashing eyes, whose 100 lines of Horace apiece was a frightful penalty indeed, could hasten along the band of scholars. One of the high spots of the year was the construction in the larger court of a tent to house the audience at the annual distribution of prizes. For several weeks, Raphael and his friends used any pretense during classes to get to a window where they might inspect the advance of this structure, which opened onto the steps descending from the chapel. What an exciting background music to recitation the blows of the hammer made as scenery was built for the play that always accompanied such a ceremony. A railway station one year for the voyage of Monsieur Percheon, an African setting another year for the production starring the Baron Descamps. And how proud the Mary Devals were of their son when the day of prizes came. Maria especially was thrilled when her Raphael, with his charming humility and ease, accepted the award for the best of the altar servers, or the Prix de Sagace. His mother kept all such marks of recognition, even the pink slips issued weekly and checked Tresbian. Raphael himself valued these honors only insofar as they brought pleasure to his family. He himself preferred to any of them the ornate rebus of his name, which his beloved father, Kekens, professor of poetry, had drawn for him one day, and which for many years he was to use as a bookmark. Some of his best hours were spent in the classroom of this priest, from whom he learned much more than Latin poetry. Together with a fellow student, Raphael acted as assistant librarian. Under his direction, a friendship was thus born and concluded, only with the good priest's death. Mary was fond of his professors, Father Worset van Cunnis and the learned Father Francis van Innes, for 13 years, professor of rhetoric at St. Michael's. Under the special guidance of the latter during this last year at the college, he attained the following places in his class. Right there. Whatever that means. (3E, 9E, 6E). For a foreign student, this was a commendable record indeed. Wherever Raphael went, Spain, England, Belgium, new friends were quickly his because of his extraordinary winning manner, frankness, and irresponsible joyousness. St. Michael's was no exception. He will be a remarkable man, these fellow students began telling each other soon after his arrival, and that conviction grew as the years 1878 to 1883 revealed his tremendous gifts and deep spirituality. Among his classmates were some young men of great talent and of great sanctity. In the first category was Hermann Ricker, destined to become a famous artist. In the second, Louis Mertens, later a Salesian father, who was to die at Liege in 1920, Liege, L-I-E-G-E, in 1920, in the odor of sanctity. The class, just younger than his, also included remarkable students: Prince Ferdinand de Croix, Valery Gilly, author and eventually member of the Royal Academy. In the class immediately above him were Ernest Hello, man of letters, hello, spelled just like hello, Ernest Hello, man of letters, and Emily van der Reen, later a noted painter. His most intimate friend, however, was Edward van der Smissen de Alost, who would later serve as professor at the nearby University of Liège. I'm going to take a sip of tea. My throat's getting dry. I'm drinking some of that tea. I hope I don't overdose on theanine. It is relaxing. Yeah, this is more than I'm used to. This will be 6 tea bags since 5 o'clock this morning. So in the last 12 hours, it's 4:44 right now. So in about the last 12 to 14 hours, because I think it was a little bit earlier than that. Yeah, I've had 6 tea bags of the L-theanine tea. It is very relaxing. I'm almost done with this cup. It's very good. All right. We're on page 12. In June of 1882, Raphael was given an unusual privilege in that he, with another student from St. Michael's, was selected to serve at the solemn high mass, at which their royal highnesses, Prince Baudouin and Princess Enrichetta, were to receive their first Holy Communion. King Leopold II of Belgium loved lavish festivities on such an occasion, and thus great preparations were made at St. James, the church of the royal family in Brussels. The splendid uniforms and the glittering gowns, the banks of flowers, the resounding gloria of the choir, and the rhythmic dignity of the Mass itself appeared to Raphael's instinct for poetry, even though from his youth court life struck him as too far from the simplicity of the gospel to be desirable. All too rapidly, the years at St. Michael's, romantic as a medieval fortress and almost as isolated from the busy urban life around it, came to an end. He had gained from every day spent within the gates that enclosed its buildings. The Jesuits combed rigor and indulgence in a way that showed deep comprehension of the possibilities, but also of the frailties of human nature. Contact with them during this formative stage increased Raphael's longing that he too, like his uncle, might be part of Saint Ignatius' glorious company. But heavy as a stone in his subconscious was the knowledge of how ill this dream would suit his father's high ambitions for him. In the autumn of 1883, after the vacation season, Raphael resumed his school days, but this time at Ushaw in England, the college which his father and uncles had attended before him, and which would offer quite a different program from that at St. Michael's. Ushaw dated back to a college established at Douai in the Flemish province of Artois in 1568. During the days of cruel persecution under Elizabeth, for the purpose of educating young Englishmen who wished to study for the priesthood. Its founder was an exiled priest who was later to become William Cardinal Allen. Local hatred, which linked the college with Spain, the enemy of the Netherlands, forced Allen in 1578 to move the school to Reims, Reims. While it existed, Douai College gave to the church 160 martyrs, besides the translation of the Bible, still in use today among Catholics. Blessed Cuthbert Maine, first of the Douai martyrs, Robert Southwell, and Alban Butler, what a name, Alban, Alban Butler, were only three of the distinguished men who once lived within its walls. How do they know? Yeah, it's from the 1500s. It's incredible. Digging through the history there. And you can take it with a grain of salt. If something fails to be true, none of it must be true. Yeah, I mean, how are you going to fact check that? Well, it's interesting when you start listening to different historians and people and the chronicles and places where they keep, what do they call it, like vaulted information or historic pieces. It is quite fascinating. It seems so many go into the direction at this moment. We have a lot of deep thinkers here who are saying it just sheds the importance of teaching awareness and continue to what makes sense in that learned history, stuff we know to be true. Yeah, so when stuff crumbles and turns to dust, we have evidence, pictures, artifacts, stories, that awareness. The rain is not God's tears. But you can say it's God's tears, depending on, I guess, the lingo. The clouds are crying. You could say God if you want, or clouds. Yeah, sure. With the advent of the French Revolution, the existence of such a college at Reims became impossible, and in 1793 it was dissolved. But 6 of its students under Dr. Lingard came to Crook Hall in England in the next year, and by 1804 a college known as Ushaw had been founded with Thomas Erie as first president. Eyre, Erie. Throughout the 25 years preceding Raphael's arrival, Usha had been turning out solid, manly graduates with independent spirits, honesty of purpose, and large-hearted sympathy were characteristic of every Ushaman. U-S-H-A-W-M-A-N. Shaman. A shaman. Honesty of purpose and large-hearted sympathy were characteristic of every shaman. And if there was anything that was despised at St. Cuthbert's, as the college was designated from its patronal saint. It was duplicity, intrigue. No wonder that many years later, when someone asked Pius X's Secretary of State, what the Vatican policy was, he promptly replied, "The New Testament." Standing on a hill 600 feet above sea level, the college was approached by two young avenues, shaded by yew trees, W-E-Y-E-W, by yew trees, a characteristic of the landscape from which some had tried to derive the name of the institution, although actually Usha meant Wolf's Hill. As Raphael drove up to the heart of the campus, the quadrangle, he saw the church in the process of being built to one side of him and the library to the other, while between the two stood a plain 3-story building contrasting in its simplicity with the two Gothic structures. As he walked up the steps, he noticed over the front door an ancient clock with 3 faces. The door was opened by a pleasant priest who conducted him through the entrance hall with its tiled floor into the ambulacrum, dominated by a statue of Our Lady. This statue, an alabaster one, represented the Virgin with the divine infant in her arms and was labeled Sadie's Sapentiae. Looking at its kind, motherly face, Raphael already felt at home. There was a serenity about this place that he liked, a first impression to be confirmed with every day he spent there. On the day of his arrival, when he had joined the other boys, Alexa, Volume 3. Alexa, play classical reading music. Alexa, Volume 5. On the day of his arrival, when he had joined the other boys, he could read questions in the eyes of his future companions. Questions as to how well this delicate-looking youth with his fair complexion and dark Spanish eyes would fit into the pattern of vigorous study and more vigorous sports, which spelled life for the husky lads at St. Cuthbert's. Sports, indeed, were extremely important in the training at Usha. The playground, or bounds, covered almost 9 acres. The most popular game was cat. 3 large cat rings having been provided for this activity. Contests between classes, though not as bitter as former struggles against the traditional foe. Lancashire, phrase discontinued in 1865 because of their ferocity, were lively enough to dismay a timid or non-athletic newcomer. Besides cat, trap on the ring, striking across, football, battledore, and racket were played, as well as handball in the 6 available racket houses, with their trim asphalt flooring. Any doubt about Raphael's skill at sports was soon dispelled. His proficiency at tennis, a recent innovation at Usha, interested but did not entirely convince the boys, some of whom regarded the game as effeminate. They regarded the game as effeminate. But the way in which Mary, after a brief period of watching, entered into the rough game of cat was proof enough to all that he was a regular fellow. True, he would never become a real expert at cat. That would have required apprenticeship from the junior seminary at St. Aloysius on up. But his courage was evidenced by his readiness to take the knocks and tumbles involved in learning how to fag, as fielding was called, or to strike. And years later, he was to recall with nostalgia how much fun this strenuous sport had been in the days of his boyhood. It took surprisingly little time to learn the ropes at St. Cuthbert's, for to each new arrival were assigned 2 playfellows, or guardian spirits, whose duty it was to instruct him in the intricacies of a social system at Usha, as well as in New Os, college slang, taboos, and of course the location of campus facilities. Though exploration of the old mill had now been ruled as too dangerous to be part of the orientation, these guardians managed to work considerable adventure into the performance of their task, and sometimes not all of their information was to be trusted. To Raphael, all of the rooms at Usha seemed enormous, but even unmagnified by youth's eyes, it was a spacious college. The great kitchen, where a jack turned roast before the open fire, the refectory, enlarged to a length of over 100 feet, has a tribute to President Tate in 1873, which its 4 of Sicilian white marble squares divided by strips of black Galway stone. The huge museum, then serving as a temporary chapel. At Usha, unlike Brussels, there was no family house awaiting the boy on weekends as a refuge from the institutional living, but he did not mind. He was happy here. In fact, he was always to regard these 2 years as among the happiest of his life. Piety was to some extent a public matter at Usha, an unaffected masculine devotion that relied heavily on the Blessed Mother and sanctified all the occupations of the day. In the refectory, grace was said together at the meals, at which spiritual reading took place except on play days or feasts, when the president's consent tongues were loosed. At dinner, a short passage from the Old Testament was read, followed by the Roman Martyrology and the English Martyrology for the day. Roman Martyrology, and the English Menology for the day, and concluded by a section from an entertaining book. Here, the mortification imposed on naturally restless boys developed in Raphael that strength of will which in after years helped him to make cheerfully the sacrifices imposed by long ceremonies at St. Peter's. At night, after benediction or night prayers, the boys all faced the statue of Our Lady of Clemency, whose hands were extended as if to bless them, and sang the short hymn, Maria Mater Gratia. In May, there were devotions to Mary each evening before another marble statue of the Virgin, known as Our Lady for Help. And at Christmas, the boys prayed in common before the cave-like crib with life-size figures constructed each December in the St. Aloysius Chapel, of the junior college.
This is girls' trip to tell you.
Alexa, Volume 1.
ourselves. With my
Alexa, Volume 1.
points on Chase Travel, but 3
Alexa, Volume 1.
brands this incredible cabin.
Alexa, Volume 1. What a stupid bitch. A relatively new enthusiasm at Usha was cricket. Until 1880, I love cricket. Until 1883, football or cat had completely eclipsed in esteem the English national game. But in the year of Mary's arrival, a committee was formed, encouraged by the president, to devise means of raising funds for the improvement of cricket. Before long, £180 had been collected, enough to hire a Yorkshire firm to lay out a magnificent field, as well as to buy a large roller and a grass cutter. Prayer and play, these were important, of course, but then there were studies too, and intensive ones. Mary's practice in declamation at the 2 Belgian colleges, together with his natural gifts, helped him not to dread speaking in the hall, as did some of his classmates, an ordeal dreadful at the time, but rewarded over by a speaking play day. Once a year, too, the theological and philosophical defensions were held in the exhibition hall, at which printed these were maintained, at which printed theses were maintained in Latin by the divines and high philosophers, in English by those specializing in natural science, against all comers.
That was that game.
3 times a year, Christmas, Easter, and Midsummer, the Licorum Assignatio, or reading up of compositions, took place. But the outstanding scholastic event was the distribution by the bishop at the end of each year of the prizes and medals, 8 of the latter, 4 silver and 4 bronze, given on the basis of voluntaries or examinations for honors. As at St. Michael's, Raphael cared little for his own sake about pops. Has Usha slang termed marks of excellence, but knowing how his mother rejoiced in his achievements, he did his best, and with success, to win such emblems of recognized merit. In the little time allowed by the horarium for private strolls, Raphael enjoyed walking down to the cemetery where Bishop Chadwick, beloved benefactor of the college, lay buried, as well as 3 Carmelite nuns, 4 bishops, the renowned historian Dr. Lingard, and many others. He liked, too, to go down near the chemistry laboratory, where 2 very old beech trees offered their shade for a leisurely rosary, or to mender up to the museum after it had been reconverted to its former use, to examine the rare specimens of shells, precious old books of ours, and ever so many more attractions. Another pastime was to stop in the kitchen yard and watch the shoe cleaning machine fitted out with circular brushes and run by a steam engine. There was always something interesting to do in the free time. Life at Usha was ordered with a dignity born of self-command, a respect for the power of the will to direct the body and the mind to rule the heart. We'll pause there. Oh, you're welcome.
What's up, Judy?
No problem.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, my reading voice was getting tired anyways. I did read a few more pages than I intended to. I wanted to get to the end of that chapter. Yeah, my voice is getting tired.
I can't say for sure. Well,
I can get a second voice wind though, if I needed to.
I think Matt was relying on that note to make it a suicide note.
Right, but I don't need to. I have a choice. So I'm going to choose to rest my
On
voice.
Stephanie by saying, she's got this history, I found I have a dream, that's all I need. I'll make it happen, so I can't believe. Know what I want, so I'll take it on. I'll make mistakes, but mistakes make you strong. Let's make it down for a minute. I want the crowd, don't get it. You hear me now that I'm winning. Yeah, Charlie Sheen will be grinning. These ladies know that I'm sinning, and this is just the beginning. I'm closing in the night, and there ain't no point in resisting. Living life like a dream, baby, right, that's a thing. Every night, got a team, I've been tied to the scene. Out on stage, here on screen. Okay, it's a dream, and I pray as a team. One day, it be me. If I want it, then I'll get it. Head down, I regret it. Push myself to the limit. If I play it, then I'll win it. I'm just saying, I'm just living for today. For a minute, I don't stay, I just lose it. Have no shame, I admit it. To see if I succeed, to see if I believe. They're looking up to me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me.
This is a popular song. A lot of people in class like it too. The only thumbs up that aren't all the way up, but they're 3/4 of the way up, which is good. Yeah, because usually they don't like stuff with like guns and war. Yeah, but I think they're starting to kind of rise above that systemic ideology. Yeah. It's progress. It is. I like it too. I love the beat. I love the lyrics. The video is awesome. What's that? You like when they're carrying the big log? Teamwork. Couldn't lift it by myself. The best of me now, the best of me now, the best of me now, the best of me now. Huh? Yeah, I said my reading voice is tired. I want the best of me now, the best of me now, the best of me now. Oh, oh. I changed the pitch. Totally different muscles and pathways. Oh.
Yeah, let's go. I'ma make a couple stacks, do exactly what I want to. Mix a couple tracks, get a lady that I'm drawn to.
Duran is my guests today, and it is plural. It's the co-hosts of the Duran, Alex Christoforo and Alexander Mercouris. From my point of view, the Duran is easily one of the very best podcasts that's out there now for those interested in comment and analysis on world affairs. Thanks both for making the time.
Thank you very much, Neil, and delighted to be here.
Thank you. I will get to the wider global picture. I want to hear for my audience your thoughts on Ukraine, Iran, Israel, the US. But first of all, I'd like both of you to focus on Britain. Particularly, I think I'll start. I'm in Scotland. I'm in Stirling in Scotland, and I'd like to hear your response to the recent speech by British MP David Davis, who, using parliamentary privilege to maximise his freedom of speech, gave an analysis of what he thought of the conviction and jailing of Morel, the past CEO of the SNP, and also Nicola Sturgeon, the former First Minister. What do you think? What do we, in terms of the state of politics in the world, what does that little particular glimpse tell us about where we are, do you think?
I think before we begin, I will explain a little about who David Davis is, because of course most of the Duran's audience won't know him. He is a long-standing Conservative politician, politically on the right. He was at one point actively considered as a possible leader of the Conservative Party and even Prime Minister. That didn't happen, and then he went on a long journey, as people sometimes do, and he remained in politics, and he became an important, well, he would say truth teller, and of course he was a strong supporter of Brexit, and is somebody who I think even his critics consider to be, somebody who speaks out for integrity in public life. And again, for those of us those who won't be familiar with all of this, what David Davis is talking about is a massive corruption scandal that we have seen at the very top of the Scottish Nationalist Party, which is of course the governing party in Scotland. Scotland has a devolved government and the SNP runs it. And we now have revelations about Nicola Sturgeon, who was for a long time the leader of the SNP and the Chief Minister of Scotland. It is now established, as many rumours had claimed for many years, that her husband Morel was deeply corrupt. And what David Davis has now done is he's gone further, as I understand it, and he's suggesting that Nicola Sturgeon and the leadership of the SNP basically acted against Alex Salmond, the previous leader of the SNP, in some ways the inspiring great leader of the SNP, who brought Scotland close to independence and who became subject to an extraordinary trial in which he was accused of various allegations, sexual allegations. Now, I should say I have some knowledge of all of this personally, because a very close friend of mine is Craig Murray, whom I presume you know. And Craig, of course, got very deep into the Alex Salmond case.